How's it going, everyone? Austin Honecker here. I just wanted to come on here for a while and give them a review for All Elite Wrestling's AEW Dynamite from 2 nights ago, which was September 28th, 2022. I gotta say, it was awesome from start to finish. For the matches, match 1, it was Bryan Danielson versus Matt Menard. That was a great match, but the ending to it, Bryan Danielson went over with the label lock. Match 2, it was Jon Moxley versus Juice Robinson in an AEW title eliminator match. That was a great match, but the ending to it, Jon Moxley went over with the cross arm breaker. Now, after the match, Hangman Page came down to the ring as Jon Moxley was celebrating his victory, and so a stare down between Jon Moxley and Hangman Page ensued, and MJF was up in the rafters, and MJF was in the rafters, and MJF got on the microphone and said, "Ladies, calm down for a minute. You both are not fighting to win. You're both fighting to lose, because when we hit the shitty city of Cincinnati, Ohio, and after you two beat the hell out of each other, I may cash in my chip. I may cash in my check for the AEW title. And I will be your next AEW champion." And as MJF continued to talk more shit, Wheeler Yuta came from behind and beat the shit out of... Wheeler Yuta attacked MJF from behind and beat the shit out of him, and the security had to come and get Wheeler Yuta off MJF, and as all that was going on, the security was also getting in between Jon Moxley and Hangman Page as well. But after Wheeler Yuta was restrained by security, MJF was pissed off and everything. That was cool. That was after the match, by the way. Match 3, it was Toni Storm versus Serena Deeb for the... Match 3, it was Toni Storm versus Serena Deeb in a lumberjack match for the interim AEW women's title. That was a great match, but the ending to it, Toni Storm went over and retained the interim AEW women's title with a diving pile driver. Match 4, it was Ricky Starks versus Eli Isom. That was a squash match, but the ending to it, Ricky Starks went over with the Rochambeau. And match 5, which was the main event, it was Chris Jericho versus Bandito for the Ring of Honor World Title. That was a great match, but the ending to it, Chris Jericho went over and retained the Ring of Honor World Title with the Lion Tamer. Now, after the match, as Ring of Honor ring announcer Bobby Cruz announced Chris Jericho as the winner, Chris Jericho demanded Bobby Cruz to get into the ring, and Bobby Cruz got into the ring, and Chris Jericho made Bobby Cruz announce his name as the winner again. Bobby Cruz announced Chris Jericho as the winner, and Chris Jericho cut a promo saying, the era of Ring of Jericho has begun. And I am going to take out every Ring of Honor champion. I'm going to take out every Ring of Honor commentator. I'm going to take out every Ring of Honor referee. And I'm also going to take out every Ring of Honor ring announcer. And then Chris Jericho ended up bag tagging Bobby Cruise, and as Chris Jericho bag tagged Bobby Cruise, Chris Jericho executed the Judas effect to Bobby Cruise and laid Bobby Cruise out, and Chris Jericho stood tall and everything. That was cool. That was after the match, by the way, and that was match 5 and the main event, by the way. Now, besides all that, the Jericho Appreciation Society, which are Chris Jericho, Jake Hager, Sammy Guevara, Daniel Garcia, Matt Menard, Angelo Parker, Anna Jay, and Ty Mello, along with Luigi Primo, had a championship celebration. Well, the Jericho Appreciation Society, they came out. Angelo Parker done the introduction and talked about how they were in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and how it was a dump and everything, and talked about how the crowd of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania needs to appreciate the Ocho, Chris Jericho, and everything. And then Matt Menard was talking about how for their celebration they got pizza, and Matt Menard asked Luigi Primo where it was made, and Luigi Primo said in New York City. And then Matt Menard kept egging it on and everything, and then Anna Jay was saying, "You all don't get pizza, so you all better shut up or I'm going to choke every one of you out." But with that being said, give it up for the best Ring of Honor World Champion there ever is, Chris Jericho. Then Chris Jericho asked the crowd if they wanted pizza, and Chris Jericho said, "You all don't get pizza." But I'm here to say this right now. Tonight, I am going to make my first ever Ring of Honor World Championship defense tonight against a very talented individual in Bandito, a man who has never submitted in Ring of Honor, a man who has never gotten his rematch for the Ring of Honor World title. So me being generous as I am awarding Bandito a shot at the Ring of Honor World title. But also, with that being said, I am going to beat Bandito, and I'm going to rip his mask off, and I'm going to beat the ever-living shit out of him, and I am going to retain my Ring of Honor World title and everything. And then Chris Jericho awarded Daniel Garcia a gift. So Daniel Garcia opened the gift and saw that it was Chris Jericho opened the gift, and it was an old hat. And Chris Jericho ended up putting the hat on Daniel Garcia, and Daniel Garcia got pissed off. Daniel Garcia took the hat off, and then Daniel Garcia attacked Luigi Primo with a punch in the face and laid him out. And then Daniel Garcia was saying, "Chris, this bullshit has been going on long enough, and I have been tolerating it long enough. I'm not tolerating it anymore." So with that being said, Daniel Garcia was getting ready to finish what he was saying, but Chris Jericho cut Daniel Garcia off, and Chris Jericho was saying, "Danny boy, do not do not make a decision that you're going to regret. Because if you leave the Jericho Appreciation Society, you'll be sorry. And everything. And then Chris Jericho and Daniel Garcia. Well, before Daniel Garcia could talk some more, Bryan Danielson. Well, the Blackpool Combat Club, which are William Regal and Bryan Danielson, came out. Well, William Regal was on the stage and Bryan Danielson came to the ring. And, before William Regal and Bryan Danielson came out, Chris Jericho asked Daniel Garcia, "Are you a professional wrestler or a sports entertainer?" Well, Bryan Danielson came down to the ring, and Bryan Danielson was saying, "Daniel Garcia, you're a talented individual. You are a professional wrestler." And Bryan Danielson continued to talk, but Chris Jericho cut Bryan Danielson off, and Bryan Danielson offered Daniel Garcia a spot in the Blackpool Combat Club, but Chris Jericho cut Bryan Danielson off and said, "Shut up, Danielson. Daniel Garcia belongs to me. Daniel Garcia belongs in the Jericho Appreciation Society, so Daniel Garcia is not going anywhere." Then Daniel Garcia was saying, "Chris, I belong to no one. I am my own man. And you don't tell me what to do." But before all that, Bryan Danielson told Daniel Garcia if he wants to stay with the Jericho Appreciation Society, he could, but if he wanted to join the Blackpool Combat Club, he could as well. But anyways, Daniel Garcia was telling Chris Jericho, "First of all, Chris, I belong to no one, and you don't tell me what to do. I am my own man. But how about this? How about I throw all this pizza in the crowd? Would that be entertaining? How about I dance around with how about I wake up Luigi Primo and make pizzas with him? Would that be entertaining? Or better yet, how about next week on Dynamite's anniversary show? It'd be Daniel Garcia, myself, and Bryan Danielson against you and your little boy, Sammy Guevara." And everything. And then Chris Jericho said, "All right, Danny boy, you got it." And then, actually Chris Jericho didn't say anything at all, but Matt Menard interrupted and said, "Daniel, I've had it with your attitude lately. When you first came to AEW, we carried you. Angelo and I, we made sure you had everything. And this is how you're going to repay us?" And everything. And then Bryan Danielson interrupted and said some shit. And then Matt Menard said, "You shut up, Bryan. I'd just like to punch you right in the face right now." Then Bryan Danielson said, "Right now? Do you all want to see Bryan Danielson and Matt Menard go at it one-on-one right now?" The crowd went wild, and Bryan Danielson said, "Well, let's go." And everything. That was cool. AEW aired a vignette of the build-up of the match between Jon Moxley versus Juice Robinson in an AEW title eliminator match. That was cool. Which the whole Jericho Appreciation Society championship celebration was cool, but like I said, AEW aired a vignette of the build-up of the match between Jon Moxley versus Juice Robinson in an AEW title eliminator match. That was cool. AEW aired highlights of the brawl between MJF and Wheeler Yuta from last week on AEW Dynamite. That was cool. Wheeler Yuta came out and cut a promo talking about how he was pissed off at MJF, not for being an arrogant prick, not for having a lot of money, and not for how he dresses or anything, but for what he did to Tony Schiavone, putting his hands on him last week and everything. And then Wheeler Yuta was talking about how he wanted to fight MJF tonight in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, but knew that MJF didn't have the balls to face him and everything. And then and talked about how MJF hides behind money, hides behind suits, would hide behind the Inner Circle and the Pinnacle and now the Firm and everything. And then Wheeler Yuta continued to talk more shit, and then MJF came out and talked about how Wheeler Yuta was an amazing talent and how they wrestled each other in all indie promotions and everything, and then talked about how Wheeler Yuta took him to the limit in their matches and everything. And then MJF was talking about how MJF was talking about how Wheeler Yuta wanted to fight him in the dump of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania and everything, but MJF was saying that's not going to happen. Next week in shitty DC, Wheeler Yuta, you want to fight? We'll fight. And Wheeler Yuta was talking about how he was going to put MJF in a puddle of blood and everything, and then MJF started talking more shit, and then Wheeler Yuta came to the stage, and MJF said, whoa there, Wilsey. And so the Gun Club, which are Colton and Austin Gunn, came down to the ring, and MJF was saying, you know, these people in this shit town of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania don't deserve to hear my catchphrase. But before we get to that, Wheeler Yuta, you want to fight next week in shitty DC? We'll fight and everything. And then MJF was saying, and these people in shitty Philadelphia, Pennsylvania don't deserve to hear my catchphrase. So Colton and Austin, take it away. MJF left, and Austin Gunn got on the microphone and said, MJF is better than you, and you know it. And so the Gun Club, which are Colton and Austin Gunn, left the ring. Left and went backstage while Wheeler Yuta was looking on and everything. That was cool. AEW aired a vignette of the build-up of the match between Jay Lethal versus Darby Allin for the AEW Dynamite anniversary show next week. That was cool. AEW aired a vignette of the build-up of the match between Chris Jericho versus Bandito for the Ring of Honor World title. That was cool. Saraya came out and cut a promo talking about how AEW was her house and how she was nervous because she hadn't done this in so long, and talked about how she's the revolution and how she's going to change the AEW women's division and everything. And then Saraya called out the AEW women's division. So Toni Storm, Athena, Madison Rayne, Sky Blue, and Willow Nightingale came down to the ring, and Saraya was putting over Toni Storm, talking about how she was finally utilized to her potential and everything, and Saraya continued to put Toni Storm over and everything. And as that was going on, Britt Baker, Rebel, Jamie Hayter, and Penelope Ford came down to the ring, and Britt Baker was talking about how Saraya was just a catchphrase, and how Britt Baker herself carried AEW on her back and talked about how her neck was strong enough to handle AEW, unlike Saraya's and everything. And then Britt Baker was making fun of Saraya's name, and Saraya said, What's funny, Britt? Because your name rhymes with shit. And then, and so Saraya and Britt Baker continued to talk more shit towards each other, and then Britt Baker introduced Serena Deeb. So Serena Deeb came out, and Saraya said, "Nah, Britt." Well, actually, Saraya said, "Well, now, I talked to Tony Khan before the show, and he said that tonight's AEW interim women's title match between Toni Storm and Serena Deeb will be a lumberjack match. And now, and finally, I have a boss who listens to me and everything." And then Saraya ended up leaving the ring. Well, Britt Baker was talking more shit, but Saraya ended up leaving the ring, and Saraya got in the face of Britt Baker and then walked off. And then, well, as Britt Baker, Jamie Hayter, Rebel, and Penelope Ford were looking on, and Serena Deeb got into the ring, and then Madison Rayne, Sky Blue, and Willow Nightingale got out of the ring and everything. Well, Toni Storm and Serena Deeb were in the ring and everything. That was cool. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Tony Schiavone interviewed Billy Gunn and The Acclaimed, which are Max Caster and Anthony Bowens. Well, Tony Schiavone brought up that The Acclaimed are now the AEW Tag Team Champions and everything, and then Billy Gunn was talking about how he was proud of The Acclaimed for winning the AEW Tag Team titles and everything, and then Anthony Bowens was talking about how everyone loves The Acclaimed and everything, and Max Caster was talking about how him and Anthony Bowens are issuing an open challenge to anyone to face them for the AEW Tag Team titles. And then Billy Gunn was talking about how next week is National Scissoring Day and everything. And then Keith Lee came along and said, Swerve couldn't be here tonight because he's disgruntled over the result of what happened last week. And looking back on it, I understand, because Billy Gunn got physically involved and cost us the AEW Tag Team titles. So good luck next week, boys. And then Billy Gunn, and then Anthony Bowens, well, Max Caster and Anthony Bowens were talking about how their title defense will be on Rampage this week and everything. And then Billy Gunn signaled for the scissor me gesture, and so Billy Gunn and Anthony Bowens, so Billy Gunn and The Acclaimed, which are Max Caster and Anthony Bowens, done the scissor me gesture and everything. That was cool. Tony Schiavone interviewed the Andrade family office, which are Andrade El Idolo, Jose the Assistant, Mark Quinn, Isaiah Cassidy, The Butcher, and The Blade. Well, Private Party, which are Mark Quinn and Isaiah Cassidy, well, The Butcher and The Blade and Private Party, which are Mark Quinn and Isaiah Cassidy, were arguing and everything, and Andrade El Idolo was telling Private Party, which are Mark Quinn and Isaiah Cassidy, listen, do you all know who your boss is? I am your boss. Jose, take it away. And so Andrade El Idolo and the Butcher and the Blade ended up leaving, and Jose the assistant said to Private Party, which are Mark Quinn and Isaiah Cassidy, Jose the assistant said, just like Andrade said, he's your boss. So you two get your shit together or get out. And then Jose the assistant left, and then Tony Schiavone was, within that whole thing, Private Party, which are Mark Quinn and Isaiah Cassidy, and the Butcher and the Blade were arguing the whole time, but fast forward. After Jose the assistant left, Tony Schiavone was getting ready to talk to Mark Quinn and Isaiah Cassidy of Private Party, but Matt Hardy came along and said, Mark, Isaiah, last week, that moment we shared was amazing. Now listen to me. Get out of your deal with Andrade, because your careers in AEW are going to be worse with Andrade than they were with Big Money Matt. So, if you can get out of your deal with Andrade, come back to me, and we'll make it right. And everything. That was cool. And Jungle Boy cut a promo talking about how... And Jungle Boy cut a promo talking about how he really cared for Christian Cage and Luchasaurus at one point in time, and talked about how they took away his moment on Rampage Grand Slam and everything, and talked about how the mantle that him and Luchasaurus used to hang the AEW Tag Team titles, now that's going to be used for the heads of Christian Cage and Luchasaurus and everything. That was cool. Now, besides all that, Taz and Excalibur done commentary throughout the whole show. They done awesome as usual. Tony Schiavone done commentary along with Taz and Excalibur throughout the whole show, all but the match between Chris Jericho versus Bandito for the Ring of Honor World title. Tony Schiavone done awesome as usual. Now, besides all that, Taz and Excalibur done commentary throughout the whole show. They done awesome as usual. Tony Schiavone done commentary along with Taz and Excalibur throughout the whole show, all but the match between Chris Jericho versus Bandito for the Ring of Honor World title. Tony Schiavone done awesome as usual. William Regal done guest commentary along with Tony Schiavone, Taz, and Excalibur during the matches of Bryan Danielson versus Matt Menard and Jon Moxley versus Juice Robinson in an AEW title eliminator match. William Regal done awesome on guest commentary. Saraya done guest commentary along with Tony Schiavone, Taz, and Excalibur during the match between Tony Storm versus Serena Deeb in a lumberjack match for the interim AEW Women's title. Saraya done great on guest commentary, and Ian Riccaboni done guest commentary along with Taz and Excalibur during the match between Chris Jericho versus Bandito for the Ring of Honor World title. Ian Riccaboni done awesome on guest commentary. Which I did say Saraya done great on guest commentary as well, but Ian Riccaboni done awesome on guest commentary for the match he did. But anyway, the referees for the event were Rick Knox, Paul Turner, Bryce Remsburg, Stephon Smith, and Aubrey Edwards. Okay. Bryce Remsburg refereed the match between Bryan Danielson versus Matt Menard. Paul Turner refereed the match between Jon Moxley versus Juice Robinson in an AEW title eliminator match. Rick Knox refereed the match between Toni Storm versus Serena Deeb in a lumberjack match for the interim AEW women's title. Stephon Smith refereed the match between Ricky Starks versus Eli Isom. And Aubrey Edwards refereed the match between Chris Jericho versus Bandito for the Ring of Honor World title. All the referees done awesome as usual. Now, the match card that's been announced for All Elite Wrestling's AEW Dynamite's anniversary show next week, it's going to be the Jericho Appreciation Society, which are Chris Jericho and Sammy Guevara versus Bryan Danielson and Daniel Garcia. Luchasaurus versus a local competitor. And MJF versus Wheeler Yuta. Besides the matches that have been announced, Billy Gunn and The Acclaimed, which are Max Caster and Anthony Bowens, will be appearing live for National Scissoring Day. So the match card for All Elite Wrestling's AEW Dynamite's anniversary show next week, so far that's been announced, looks like it's going to be awesome. I can't wait to see it, and I'm looking forward to it. And the match card for All Elite Wrestling's AEW Rampage tonight, it's going to be The Acclaimed, which are Max Caster and Anthony Bowens, versus Private Party, which are Mark Quinn and Isaiah Cassidy, versus The Butcher and the Blade in a three-way tag team match for the AEW tag team titles. John Silver versus Roosh. Lee Moriarty versus Fuego del Sol. And Jamie Hayter versus Willow Nightingale. Now, besides the matches that have been announced so far, Hook will be appearing live. So the match card for All Elite Wrestling's AEW Rampage for tonight, that's been announced for tonight so far, looks like it's going to be awesome. I can't wait to see it, and I'm looking forward to it. But anyway, I just wanted to come on here for a while and give them a review for All Elite Wrestling's AEW Dynamite from 2 nights ago, which was September 28th, 2022. Like I said, it was awesome from start to finish. And with that being said, my name is Austin Honecker, and I will catch your ass down the road. Peace out.